So it's that time of week again when I make a little video. And I was kind of like, I was going to do something with the RV because that's kind of what this whole idea started as, was specifically about the RV. But the thing about the RV is I have lots to say, but I don't have anything to show you, and I think that's kind of boring. I've been getting a lot of good advice on how to rebuild the part of the cab that needs to be rebuilt, and how to put in new vents in the top and seal the roof. So I have a lot of information, but it's too cold for any of those products to set right now. Like I haven't got I'm going to use metal, I think, instead of cedar, because I think it'd be, you know, a better choice than something that can and will rot eventually. But I have to check it out and see if I can even get it here. So, you know, there's like things in progress, but not a lot happening in terms of the actual building to show you. So it's kind of, I went and checked out products. I know everything I'm going to do. I just have to wait for it to get above 10 degrees before I can start gluing and wallpapering and painting in there. So that's kind of on hold for the moment. It should be good to go. I would guess it couldn't be more than 2 weeks. It should be warmer by now, but we'll see what happens. So I asked people what, like, I should do a video on. A friend of mine said I should do a video on baking bread. I bake bread. I make all my own bread, and it's one of the many kind of food things that I do. I like food and I like to cook. I'm by no means a chef. I don't work in commercial kitchens, generally speaking. I can, but I prefer a slower pace. I like to take my time. So I think what I'm going to do is show you me making bread, and that's what I'm going to do today. And so this was my little introduction to a video on making bread, and we'll get to that right away. Okay. Okay, so to start with, okay, I know this recipe off by heart. I don't measure precisely anymore now that I've been doing this for a couple of years. So what you start off with is a pot for boiling, and this is a potato bread recipe, and I like to use russet potatoes. I peel them. I use 4 about this size. You can see what size that is by my hand. You know, they don't have to be huge, but they shouldn't be too small. And I peel them, chop them, put them in the pot, and I put about, you know, that much water, like about half a pot of this size, a pot of water. And I'm not going to give you exact measurements, so I don't think you can really use this as a recipe. It's just kind of what I do when I make bread. So that's the first thing I do. Okay, so there's the pot of potatoes, and that's about how full I do it. I'm not going to give exact measurements. This is going to be kind of like cooking with my good friend's Irish mammy, where she would say to me, well, you know it yourself when it's done, and you know it yourself how much to use, and you know yourself, right? So it's kind of like that kind of cooking. It's like you've done it a million times, you've made bread a million times, and you just know you need about that much water to make. I make 2 double batches at a time, so I have like 2 bread bowls going at the same time. And I do 2 recipes separately that make 2 loaves. And the reason I do that is because I find that a 4 loaf recipe is too much for my little arms and hands to manage. So I break it into, like, most recipes are for 2 loaves of bread anyway. And I find too, when you start, like, because I estimate a lot of things, when you start changing your routine and you double a recipe and say make 4 loaves of bread in 1 bowl, not only is that going to be huge and hard to handle, it's gonna possibly throw off your method. I find like I can do 2 loaves in one bowl, and that's as big as I go. So I'm all about the tiny micro kind of itty bitty batches. I'm not at all interested in commercial cooking in mass quantities. This is to do yourself at home in your kitchen, just like I'm doing it, I guess. Okay, this is my handy dandy system for measuring out the yeast. I put, well, this yeast is in my nice peanut butter jar that my mom and dad gave me. And it's getting a little older, so I'm going to use 2, you can see in each bowl of these, and 2, this is really weird to do. I'm doing everything one-handed. Okay, because I don't have a GoPro. So that's how much yeast I use. And then I like to put sugar in my yeast mixture because it helps the yeast bloom. And I do 1, not a huge teaspoon, but 1 teaspoon. Or sorry, this is not a teaspoon. This is like a large tablespoon. And then I have my 2, I've moved all my stuff from there onto here because I'm cooking in a tiny house, so everything gets moved around when I bake. So I put 1 of these in here. So it's 2 tablespoons of sugar, of brown sugar, per batch is what it amounts to. And then I get my whisks. I have wash my hand there. And I get my whisks. I have 2, 1 for each batch. You can see the organization in my little tiny house. I have all my cooking stuff in one drawer, and I just kind of mix this together. It doesn't matter too much if you cross over because they're going to be the same at this point anyway. But if you start mixing ingredients and doing different things in each bowl, because I do that sometimes. I'm going to make 2 different batches today, but I'm not going to do them at this point. At this stage, they're the same. But what I want to do is I want to do a tomato bread and a plain bread because I like to have variety in my bread. And then olive oil. I like to put some olive oil in there. This is a nice extra virgin olive oil that my aunt gave me. I like rich bread, so I put, about that much. I like a nice rich bread, and fat will make it like that. And I'm thinking that's about enough. Most recipes call for a 1/4 cup of oil, which is, roughly 2 tablespoons. So, this is going to be around there. So that goes in there. And then let's see what's in my salt pig. My salt pig is empty. So that means I have to crack salt, which will take 2 hands. But I use this sea salt, this pink stuff. That's what I use. And I put like a teaspoon-ish of salt in there, And so that's that for. Okay, so the next step is the potatoes are done cooking. They're nice and soft. I'm going to add 2 cups ice cold water. We want to have a nice deep amount of water because we're going to put in an immersion blender. And immersion blenders will spit at you hot water if you're not careful and you don't have enough water in there. So this is the next step. Mash up all those potatoes into a very liquid mashed potato mixture. that should about do it. I pop this off. I just take the top right off, lay that down, and take this out. Now that should be pretty liquid. The potatoes are nice and soft, and I don't feel a lot of lumps in there. I've got gloves on because I don't like to get dough under my fingernails, but that means I can't really test this so I'm gonna have to take my glove off. Hold on. So the temperature you want, ouch, that's too hot. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a tray of ice cubes in there. Hold on. So this is still a nice consistency. It's not too watery. And I just stir the ice cubes around. So what I'm looking for is like baby bottle temperature. Like warm, but not hot. You should be able to dab it onto the inside of your wrist like you would do with like a baby's bottle to figure out if it's warm enough or too warm. Okay, so that once you get it to the right temperature, which it is, I take this is a 1/4 cup, and I take a 1/4 cup of this liquid, and I put it in the yeast. I'm going to do 2 in each this time because I've been doing that lately, but you can do just a 1/4 cup. So you put that into the yeast mixture. God, this thing is close up. I wonder if I've got it on Zoom. Seems really weird to me. Yeah, I did. Okay. Okay, so, and then I stir this up. Like, a lot of people lay the yeast kind of on top and let it work that way, but I like to stir this up and get all the sugar and yeast all mixed up together, and then I let it sit and bloom. And you can see, whoops, we got to mix a little bit more of that edge is in there. Let's just check them both. Okay, so you can see it's working already. See the bubbles? It's already starting to work. So I can get it to stop being so blurry. And that will be ready in a few minutes. Meanwhile, we have these. And what we're going to do is we're going to take, I'm going to have to turn off the video again because I can't do this with one hand. I'm going to take this liquid and I'm going to pour it into that 4-cup measuring cup. I fill it all the way up, past, like all the way to the top. If you can see that. It doesn't want to stop being blurry. So I fill it all the way to the top, and then I split it between the 2 bowls. Okay, there we go. We've got, now I'm going to start using 2 separate whisks because sometimes I do different things in each one. Then you just give that a stir and mix in all the sugar and get the oil all mixed in. Mixing the sugar and the oil. And each batch will take between 5 and 6 cups of flour. White flour. I don't use anything fancy. I tend to put more effort into like flavoring the bread than putting in unusual flours and whatnot like that. So I'm going to put this over here and up here. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to keep this is my only counter space for working the bread, is this little counter space. So I'm trying to keep everything off of it. If you have extra potato water, freeze it and use it next time. Okay, so this is about what I like my yeast to look like. It's all fluffy, it's mostly dissolved, and it's nice and just, you can really see that it's bubbled up and it's fluffed up and it's way bigger than it used to be. So I'll put 1 of these in each bowl. Okay, so that's what it looks like after the yeast has been stirred in. Now, you can use any kind of sugar you want. My dad likes to use molasses when he makes his bread. You could use honey. I use brown sugar. You could use just white table sugar, like whatever kind of sugar, but the yeast needs sugar to eat, to really activate it. You're not going to have a fluffy bread if you don't have sugar in it for the yeast to eat. And you don't need a ton of it, like 2 tablespoons is good. So this is what I'm going to do, is just mix in the flour. And you can see that. This is what the first cup looks like. You get to use the whisk maybe for, 2 cups, and then I switch to a wooden spoon. I don't like to stick my hands in sticky grossness. So I do 2 things. I mix in the flour without hardly touching my bread. I knead it, but when it's sticky like this, I don't touch it. I don't like it. I don't want it all over me. I don't want it under my nails. I think it's like, this stuff dries like concrete. Like it's really hard to get off your skin, much less out from under your nails. So I wear gloves and I use spoons and whisks. I'm not a big, like, when I was younger, I used to do well method, and you really have to use your hands with well method. Well method is when you make a big heap of flour in the middle of your bread making table. You need a proper table, and you make that big pile, and then you make a well, and then you pour your liquid ingredients and you mix it that way. I don't like that style. I do it in bowls. Okay? So that's 2 cups of flour, and that's what it should look like at 2 cups of flour. And you can see I can pretty much get this off my whisk. I would just wanna, and do put your whisk in water quite right away, or this stuff dries on to your utensils and is like cement. You probably use it to glue up like hard as nails, or whatever that stuff is called. Not hard as nails, liquid nails. You probably use, except for with mold. But okay, so then this is the 3rd cup of flour, and I do each one. And as you can see, I don't make sure I've got exactly a cup of flour. It's not about exact measurements. It's about knowing the general texture that you're trying to achieve, right? And if you're never going to get exactly the amount of flour into your bread that it says in your book anyway, because altitude makes a difference, humidity makes a difference. Wherever you're making your bread affects how much flour you're going to be able to work into the dough. So never worry if it calls for 6 cups and you get 5 or 5.5. Don't worry about that. Worry about what your dough looks like, what it feels like, and how it's accepting the flour, right? Okay, so then I just mix this in, and I cannot do this one-handed, so I'm gonna have to turn this off again. Okay, so this is 4 cups of flour, and that's what it looks like when I start getting my hands in there. So I'll probably put in 1 more cup of flour to each loaf. So I'm probably doing a 5-cup batch this time, maybe 4.5, 5.5, somewhere around there. I'm not going to show you again until I get it to the point where it's going to rise. So that's it. I'll show you when I've kneaded in all the flour what it should look like. All right, there it is. And it's been rubbed with the extra virgin olive oil so that as it sits, it doesn't form a leathery outside, right? So this has got to sit for about an hour. It's nice and warm in here, so I like to get a good gauge of how big it is right now, and I want to see it up to like here. Like it needs to be big, right? Big and soft. And you see how it's kind of grainy? A lot of that is going to go as it rises. it'll get really smooth and doughy and elastic. And when you pull it out of the bowl to knead it on the counter, it's going to be smooth. It's not going to have that, it's not going to be dense like this, and it's not going to have that, you know, that look to it, if you can see what I mean. It'll be smooth. God, the focus on this thing is crap. Anyway, so this one's already starting to do it. If you can get a look at that, it's already starting to look smoother because it's already rising. It's probably risen about an inch since I stopped kneading it. So that should take, you know, maybe an hour, maybe a little less or maybe a little more. You want to have a nice warm house with no drafts to raise your bread. If your house is cold at the floor, put your bread on top of the refrigerator to rise. Somewhere up near the ceiling is going to be a lot warmer in like a drafty house or an older house. Back when I was a kid and I lived out kind of in the bush. Well, I grew up in the bush kind of, and you know, we had wood heat, and our houses were not built to code like they are today. I don't think they even had vapor barriers, or some of us didn't even have insulation. So, you know, you really depended on wood heat, and wood heat is either blazing hot or freezing cold. So, you know, when you made bread, you made it in a wood stove, in a wood burning stove, not a heater that you heat with, but like an actual wood stove for the kitchen. This is what we used to make bread in. And, you know, you get that stoked up and it heats up the whole house. So you're doing other things when you're making bread, and you can just put it up near the ceiling and it'll be nice and warm and it'll rise. In a modern house, you want to kind of figure out where your warm spots are. Like, I think in a really like my house was built in the 1920s, maybe earlier, so it's drafty, and it's warmer up near the ceiling. I don't have a basement, I have a crawl space, so the floor is really cold. So this is on the counter. It's a little cold. I could put it up on top of the refrigerator, but it's such a warm sunny day, I'm just going to risk it and leave it in the middle of the room instead of putting it up near the ceiling. Hey, so I just had somebody come to my door and I got pulled away from this for a little while, and while I was gone, look what happened. My bread got huge. See what I mean by how it's smooth now? It doesn't have that rough look, rough texture. It's all smooth, it's all elastic and doughy and beautiful. I'm gonna wait just a little bit longer before I get started on kneading it. Here we have the flour for flouring the board. And this is the ingredients for the tomato bread. There's tomato paste. This is a mixture of cracked white pepper, oregano, basil. This is rosemary from my garden. It's 2 sprigs about this size. And then I put everything that I grind. I do have a hand grinding mortar and pestle, but for such a big project, I used my coffee grinder. So this is rosemary ground in the coffee grinder. This is pink Himalayan salt ground in the coffee grinder. This is white pepper and basil and oregano ground in the coffee grinder. And then tomato sauce. And then extra virgin olive oil, which has my floury fingerprints all over it. Maybe if I back up, it'll get clearer. Anyway, that's what I've got. And in a few minutes, I'll put one together. Okay, so there it is. And it's on the board, ready to get rolled out. And over here, I've got all my stuff moved over here so that I can use that whole space. These are the baking sheets. I like to bake mine on baking sheets, and that's cornmeal on there, just so you know. And this is sea salt, chopped garlic, tomato paste, oregano, basil, and white pepper, and rosemary, and then olive oil. Okay, I'm going to try and do this one-handed. So what I do is I get the tomato paste, And, you know, much like putting the base layer on a pizza, just spread the tomato paste all around. Make sure you go right to the edges or you'll have heels of bread with no tomato sauce. So get right to the edges. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is rustic. It's not supposed to be a perfect shape or size. I suppose in bakeries they measure everything, you know, and everything's a certain weight, but I don't do that. I just roughly cut the dough in half with my trusty knife, and away you go. So the next thing you need after the tomato paste is the olive oil, and I just drizzle that on. I just drizzle on some olive oil, and then I spread it all around. The olive oil makes, like, you have to have the olive oil. It just makes it so delicious. And then the next thing I put on is the chopped garlic. You need lots. I made lots. So it's like the major flavor in this is the tomato, the garlic, the rosemary. And then everything else is kind of like on the side. And I'll just rinse my hands. And go in for, just take this hot pad out of the way. Yeah, you can see all my stuff there, because that's all the stuff that's usually back here on the counter. But I need a lot of space to do this, so I just move everything around. So then the rosemary is a really key thing. So we'll do the rosemary next. And you don't want to use all of it on one. And then some of this, which is pepper and oregano. And you want a fair bit. Don't be chintzy. And then this is really good. It's a very salty thing. You only eat a little bit of it. You don't eat like tons. So then you got to put the salt on. And it's got big chunks and fine powder. And that's key as well, is that it's not all one or the other. And that's everything that goes inside. And there they be. And they have to rise again till double in size. These ones are kind of stick together down the side, but I'm not that worried about it. I'm not going to even try all that hard to separate them. I'll break them apart when they're done. It's hard to, I don't have a full-size oven. I have a tiny apartment size oven, so the most I can do is 4, and I like to do them flatter rather than taller because that's how it fits in my oven best. But you can make them any shape you want. You don't have to make them rustic like this. If you want perfectly loaf pan shaped loaves, go for it. This is salt, pepper, oregano, and basil on top of these 2 plain loaves, and then salt, pepper, oregano, and basil on top of these 2 tomato loaves. And there's also olive oil spread all over there. So that, I mean, I like the effect of having the olive oil on there. It has a nice effect when you're on the crust. So that's why I do that. And now I'm going to put my kitchen back together. One last little thing that I forgot to mention is that I put my oven on to preheat right now. It's on 375, and I put it on when I put these out to rise, because that way your oven's ready when you're ready. When you decide you're ready, it's ready right now, and it warms the kitchen and helps your bread rise. Okay, look at these babies. They're all fluffed up and all risen, and you can see I put all my stuff back where it usually goes. So I'm going to stick these in the oven, and I might show you halfway through. So my oven is so tiny. All ovens have hot spots and cold spots. Mine is hot at the back, and it so what I do is I have 2 racks, and I'll show you where I position them, and that's my tiny oven, and those are my 2 racks. So I'll put them in, and I'm going to put the tomato loaves on the bottom and the plain loaves on the top. Now the top will cook on the plain loaves faster, and the bottom will cook on the tomato loaves faster. So I'll switch them at a certain point, and I'll rotate them so that the ends change direction as well, so that I don't end up with them overcooked on the bottom or top or either end. So that means rotating them and changing them. So I put them on for 45 minutes, and I probably move them 4 times in that space of time. I'm not going to show you all of that. I'm just telling you that's what I do. All right, so this is the finished product, and that's it, all baked. The light is going now, so it's getting dark out. So, well, it's not really dark out, but it's darker in my kitchen. And that is what it looks like when it's all baked. I wish you could smell. I wish there was smell-o-vision. Little teapot, short and stout, tip me over and pour me. All right, so that's this video, and have a great week, and I will see you next week with something else. I guess if you want, you can like and subscribe, and if you push the little button, you get a little bell every time I put something new up. Have a great week.